For this presentation, I want to talk about emotions and emotional safety. And this is a topic that is rarely, if ever, discussed in the context of our workplaces. And it is really a shame because I think that emotional safety is an extremely important trait for any organization. I even went as far to call it the effectiveness superpower. So given that I'm a regular here at this event, probably quite a few of you do know me, but for those of you who don't, my name is Paweł Brodzin, and I work at Lunar Logic. Lunar Logic is a mobile and web development agency in Krakow. And formally, my role there is a CEO. And I say formally because the pure reason why we even have a CEO is that it's a legal requirement to have one, because we have no managers whatsoever. You can also find me on my blog, which is at brodziński.com, and my Twitter handle is Paweł Brodziński. So those of you who do know me, you also do know that I like to share stories. So I want to start this presentation with a story. And because I'm going to talk about emotions, the story is going to be a personal one. So we have that thing at Lunar that is called a happiness chart. So on any given day, everyone who pops up at work, they would feel a happiness chart sharing what their mood is and what they are, more importantly, what are the mental capabilities on that day. So we can look at that in retrospect, and we can look at the data from the happiness chart in retrospect and figure out what is the happiness index for anyone. So this is a picture of my happiness index, and on this chart there are more than 3 years worth of data. So each data point here is a month worth of my mental capabilities. So what you are looking at right now is a picture of me being in proverbial deep shit. Back then, almost 3 years ago, I was going through what I thought was the worst time in my life, personally. My marriage broke up, and I wasn't in my best shape. That was definitely true. However, one thing about me is that I always tend to look for good sides of any situation. I always believe that the glass is half full. So, well, I thought that things will be better. Besides, that they could always be worse. As a matter of fact, they are right now. So, me being here on the stage is quite of a challenge here. However, the story is not really about me being in personal distress. The story is about how differently I acted back then, almost 3 years ago, and how differently I act right now when I'm at work. So back then, when people would approach me and they would be like, "Hey, Paweł, what's up?" I'll be like, "Well, it's all fine, it's all fine. I'm coping well." I would basically refuse to answer a question. I would refuse to be helped. Right now, when people are asking me what's going on, I would give them the answer openly, honestly, sometimes brutally. So what has changed over that time? There is one important difference, and the difference is right now I feel emotionally safe. Right now I feel I can share whatever is happening, and through that I act very differently. So a quick question to you here in this room: who feels completely safe to share all the emotions that are within you, all the things that are burning in your heart when you are at work? Very, very few hands. And actually, it is to be expected. It is to be expected because we are supposed to show our professional selves when we are at work. And I see a problem with that. And the problem definition starts with how I define the industry we are in. So we are running a software development company, right? Well, except I don't say that we are in software development industry. What I used to say is that we are in problem-solving industry. Because if the core of our work was software development, our work should be measured through, I don't know, measuring a number of high-quality lines of code or a number of software features that we build. That would be utter bullshit. What we are really doing, we are solving problems for our clients. We are in problem-solving industry. And if we are in problem-solving industry, there is an awesome research that is extremely relevant to that definition. And this is research run by Anita Woolley on collective intelligence. Why this research is relevant? Because collective intelligence is a proxy metric for how well teams are solving complex problems. If we want our teams to be good at solving problems, we need to boost their collective intelligence. And those of you who do know me, they also know what's going to happen next. Because one of the follow-up findings of this research is that the more women we have on a team, the better collective intelligence. And it's not about reaching 50-50 diversity. As a matter of fact, performance curve goes up when we have more women in a team than 50%, and it flattens out when teams are dominated by women. But that's not what I want to preach today. What I want to share today is going one level deeper, which is looking at the actual data from the research. So contrary to popular belief, adding a token woman to a purely male team doesn't make the team better. As a matter of fact, the performance goes down. Only when we get more women, team's performance goes up. Now, the interesting thing is how Anita Woolley explains that phenomenon. What she says is, when you add a token female to a team, you don't hear from her very often. And it is true not only for women in male-dominated teams, it is true for any diverse person in a team setup. For anyone who has a very diverse point of view, very diverse walk of life. If you add a single person to otherwise homogeneous team, you don't hear from them very often. Why? Because they don't feel emotionally safe to share. Because they are afraid that they will be laughed at, mocked, or ignored altogether. This is why emotional safety is important. Another thing, experimentation. Well, we are in Lean and Agile community. Lean is all about experimenting the hell out of everything, right? So let me refer to one of people who I respect very, very much, Don Reinertsen, who will be keynoting today at the end of the day. What Don has to say about well-designed experiment is this. Well-designed experiment is one where we don't know its outcome. So if we design an experiment that is likely to succeed and it succeeds, we learned nothing. If we design an experiment that is likely to fail and it failed, we learned nothing. What we want to do is we want to design experiments where we don't know what's going to happen, because this is when we learn most. The problem is that then we cannot really prepare for the outcome of that experiment. We put ourselves at risk of being blamed. So unless we feel emotionally safe, we would be running safe experiments, which means that we suppress our learning. So a good story to picture that is the story of Will. Will, among other things at Lunar, helps me with sales. And one thing that I tell about sales at Lunar, that we never, ever, as a principle, sell fixed price projects. Ever. In the history of the company. Well, except that Will the other day proposed such a contract to one of our potential clients. And you know what? That client accepted. So then we ended up running this crazy experiment, running a project that we weren't supposed to run. And if not the fact that Will felt emotionally safe, he wouldn't try that experiment. And while financially the project wasn't probably the best one, we learned a lot from that experiment. Another thing is feedback. Who would like to get more feedback that we are getting? Everyone. Now, interestingly, who, at least on some occasions, restrain themselves from sharing feedback with others? I bet the answer is everyone again. So what we are looking at is we crave for feedback, we would like to get more feedback, but at the same time, when we are about to share feedback, on some occasions we don't do that. We are hypocrites, aren't we? Well, the thing is that I have a really good explanation of that. And that explanation is a sense of discomfort we feel when we are about to share difficult feedback. And this sense of discomfort is through lack of emotional safety, because we are afraid how the other person would react. And this is why we restrain ourselves from sharing feedback. Then we have personal development. So one reason why I'm doing public speaking is to share pictures of my son publicly. Here it is. This is my son Wojtek, developing himself personally through learning a difficult skill of climbing the stairs. So when we're talking about personal development, one of the models that is like really nice to describe how we are doing that is 4 stages of competence. So first of all, we start at unconscious incompetence. We suck at something and we don't know that. Then somehow we raise awareness. So we still suck at that, but at least we are conscious about that. So we reach the point of conscious incompetence. Then we start learning. We learn, and eventually we reach the point of conscious competence. And then we practice that new skill eventually we reach the point of unconscious competence. So we are good at it and we don't even think about it anymore. Now let's go through that cycle and let's look at the transitions. So first of all, we suck at something and we don't know that. What triggers our awareness? Well, pretty frequently, it's feedback that we get. Because ultimately, we don't want to be bad at anything. So as long as we know that we suck at something, we start learning. So how do we learn? Well, we read books, we try things, we experiment. So I'm looking at those 2 initial transitions, and I see that unless we feel emotionally safe, we would suppress our effectiveness on progressing personally at anything, because we wouldn't be getting enough feedback and we would be designing experiments that don't speed up learning. So we already established that emotional safety is important, because emotional safety boosts our individual contributions. It speeds up our learning, enables us to help others, and helps us to develop ourselves personally. Emotional safety is important. So how do we introduce emotional safety to our organizations? Well, you don't have emotionally safety chief officers out there, do you? Well, it's not that easy. So what do we require to feel emotionally safe? Well, we require trust. If I trust people around, it would be much easier for me to open myself, to show my emotions. But then, trust doesn't happen overnight. And to build trust, one model that I really like is the one offered by Patrick Lencioni in 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He says, we need to become vulnerable. So the way it happens is, I open myself just a little bit. I make a step forward and open myself just a little bit, and I sense the reaction. I probe the reaction. And if that reaction is respectful, it's supportive, I will make another step and another. And eventually, I will learn to trust other people. But that process wouldn't even start unless I feel respected. Unless I feel that people around respect my walk of life, my diverse point of view, whatever I'm thinking. And respect is so much easier when we have empathy. Because if we have empathy around, it is so much easier to understand people, why they are behaving the way they are behaving. So I look at this picture, this ladder, if you will, and I think that, well, you cannot hire emotional safety. You cannot hire trust either. Well, you cannot hire vulnerability. It is really hard to hire respect. You can hire empathy, though. And as a matter of fact, it is a nice way to remind about that lady again. Because it seems that there are 2 important factors to drive high collective intelligence of a team, and the more important one of those 2 is empathy. So if we are hiring for empathy, not only we help ourselves to reach this point of emotional safety at an organization, but we also helps our teams with a skill of solving problems. And this is how we are hiring. So most of the companies out there, when they are about to hire a person, they would be aiming for that candidate who is on the top of this picture. The best technically skilled person. We don't do that. We have a bar of technical skills that is required. And once someone is above the bar, and it doesn't matter whether they are just about the bar or that much about the bar, we don't care that much about technical skills. What we care about is their collaboration skills, their communication skills, and their character traits, and empathy being one of the most important ones on that account. The other thing that you can pay attention to is our norms. What is acceptable in your organization and what is not acceptable in your organization. And I literally say here about informal norms rather than official rules. So think of situations like you are having a lunch and you see your colleague having a beer to their lunch. How do you react? Is that acceptable or not? Because I bet there is no rule about that in your company. And why norms are important? Because norms help to change, influence organizational culture. So this is Julia. Julia is one of our developers. And one of the things that Julia is known of is she's pointing at me whenever I'm being passive-aggressive. So she would be like, hey, Paweł, you are being passive-aggressive again. So through her behavior, not only she helped me to become aware of my behaviors, but also, hopefully, she helped me to get rid of those behaviors, at least partially. So through that, she helps to bring such insensitive, unempathic bastards as I am on the journey with them. Another thing that we should be paying attention to if we want to increase emotional safety are organizational constraints. And two of my favorites are transparency and autonomy. And what I keep saying when it comes to transparency and autonomy is that they need to go head to head. You cannot increase transparency without increasing autonomy, because then people would realize how many unfair things are going on, and they would understand that they cannot do anything about those, and it would trigger frustration. You cannot increase autonomy without transparency, because then you will ask people to make decisions and you won't give them relevant information to make those decisions, so they would be making stupid calls. So you need to raise both of them at the same time. And the real change in our case was when we applied that to salaries, the thing that I was mentioning during my lightning talk. So what has happened there? Well, in our process, we basically share our opinions, but we share them in a written form because we want to be able to get back to how we thought about, or how we discussed about, a raise for any given person. And given that we leave those opinions there and people would be able to go back to them and read them later, we learned to be respectful and thoughtful. Well, the other thing is that we are discussing a very sensitive topic, and like money is a very sensitive topic. So through thinking of those organizational constraints, we also boosted how we act. We improved respect at the company, and through that we also helped ourselves to become more create more emotionally safe environment. And I was on the fringes of that for years. This is a picture of the very first company retreat that we ran in 2013. And one of the things that we worked on back then was we tried to define common values at the company. And one of the things that made it to the list was emotional safety. And back then I was like, what? I wouldn't understand that. But I should have. Because we want to feel emotionally safe all the time. I mean, think of it. When you are at home, do you want to feel emotionally safe? Well, obviously you do. Now, given the choice, if you're at work, would you like to feel emotionally safe too? I bet you would. But at the same time, you are supposed to sustain this picture of our professional selves who don't bring emotions to work, who are supposed to do our work efficiently. And you know what? Sustaining that mask, sustaining that view of our professional selves takes energy, and through that we cannot give our best on any given day at work. But not only that, What's more, because most of us do wear that mask, we are not aware of the issues that our colleagues are facing. It means that accidentally, we may be assholes to them. We may make their lives even more miserable than those lives are already. Not only that, on any given day, we may realize that some of our colleagues are going through like really, really serious troubles. So, talking about lunar example, take a random day, and it can mean that on that day, one of your colleagues has a spouse who is fighting cancer. 2 more are going through depression episodes. 1 more is going through a tough divorce, fighting for time with their kid. Well, that would be me. 2 others are just after serious breakups. And you can say, hey, Paweł, did you just mention like 1/4 of your company? Aren't you guys dysfunctional? And my answer to that would be, well, your organizations are no different. The only difference is that you are not aware of that. And because you are not aware of that, you cannot help those people. You cannot offer your help. And being on the receiving end of that mechanism right now, I can assure you how valuable and how helpful it is. So I started with a story. I want to finish with one. This is Anya. Anya is one of our most senior developers at Lunar. And a few years ago, Anya decided to check whether the grass on the other side of the fence is greener. Well, it's not, by the way. Nevertheless, she decided to check. So Anya, who was leaving, was self-confident professional who believed in her skills, who believed in the value she can provide. And she wanted to validate their career opportunities. It's 15 months later. I'm sitting with Anya at our office, and we are discussing an opportunity for her to come back to Lunar. And I'm speaking to a very different person. Anya, who's coming back, is in doubt. She doesn't believe in her anymore. She doesn't believe she is so good developer as she thought she was. Why? Because her openness, honesty, care, empathy was exploited to build a sense of guilt in her because, I don't know, they wanted her to pull more hours in or whatever. Long story short, we end up rehiring Anya. And in a matter of weeks, she is the same shining example of an awesome developer she had been when she left. So the difference is not about her. The difference is about work environments she is or was in. And the story is sad, and the story is sad not because Anya experienced less than perfect working environment. Well, that happens probably to every one of us. The story is sad because it is so common. Because despite the fact that we are emotional human beings, we design our workplaces as if we were machines. And because of that, modern workplace is fundamentally screwed up. So my challenge for you is not to turn your workplaces around, because that would be too much to ask. My challenge for you is to be more supportive whenever you see any of your colleagues showing emotions at work. And I want you to start from tomorrow. Thank you very much.